about this last week, about 3 stages of love's development as a point, line, and area. Whoever was here, if you watched it on Facebook, so let's read a little and see how these. Last week we described that these are 3 stages called attraction, growth, and unity. And we said that there has to be an initial attraction, that's the point. And then there is the growth, which is the line. And that's the main phase. And growth requires a tremendous amount of bittul. It corresponds to chokhmah. And unity is the final thing that we call love. Really, to be loved or to love means to be one with somebody else. Right, that's the dveikut. Right. That's what we talked about last week. Okay, so this time I want to read through it and get to some more things, especially how this has to do with Abraham. Okay,
what's the word for traction you're translating as attraction?
Meshicha. It's here in the, we'll see in a second. Okay? So let's see. So, Meshicha Gdilat Veikut, or attraction, growth, and unity. The manifestation and fulfillment of love unfolds through 3 basic stages. The first is Meshicha, attraction, or being drawn towards the object of love. So there is attraction. You can't discount attraction from love. In that sense, the Rav is fond of saying that there's love at first sight. That's what you call attraction. Love at first sight is like when a person, in his super consciousness, in his crown, he feels that somehow I'm related to this thing that I'm attracted to. But you can't build love on that. There can't be the final form. It has to be like a motivation, but it can't do more than that. Next comes gdila, or growth, where the attraction takes root and the relationship begins to develop and flower. Finally, the relationship enters a state of dveikut, clinging, where love achieves unity and oneness. Right? This is what we actually are striving for in every relationship. So you could call it yichud, but here it's not exactly yichud. Yichud means that there's really only one thing. Here we're not saying that. In terms of love, there's already 2 things. There really are 2 things. But they're unified. Unified, so unfortunately in English it's the same word. In Hebrew it's a different word. Dveikut comes from, it's like glue.
Devik.
And it's the devik, which means that you're really gluing 2 things together. That's what they say about gluten. That's why people love gluten. Right? Because there's so much love in it. It sticks to your gut. Because that is the etymology of gluten. It comes from the word glue. It's the same. Or glue comes from gluten. I don't know what you use. Right. The initial, the way it's defined in Chassidus, in terms of glue, what it means to have the veikut. It means that I have no interest except for this thing. Meaning to love somebody in the sense of dveikut is that this is my love interest. This is the only thing I'm interested in. I don't have any other agenda. This is my agenda. So for instance, when they talked about dveikus between a Rebbe and the Chassid, so the Chassid felt that this was his agenda, whatever the Rebbe said. Dveikus between a person and Hashem means that even though there are 2 here, but dveikus means that I have no other agenda except what Hashem wants. And it works in both ways. It also means that Hashem has no agenda except for what I want, or what I need, or what would make my life good, and so on. Yichud is to say that really there's only one thing here. Because yichud in Hebrew comes from the word one. So it's really oneness. So what he says here, oneness, is not exactly the right word.
You cannot have yichud with another person?
Then, we use the word, but only in a
Aspire to.
no, as like a metaphoric sense. Yichud is like also like alone. It also means being alone. the singular one, right? That it's singular. There's nothing like it. Yachid hu, that he is singular. He's unique. That's really the main meaning of yichud.
And then with Yechidus.
Yechidus is like that, right, that you become one completely.
To reach the level of yichud.
In any case, yichud is in the dat. It's a knowledge. The knowledge is always that there is another. In any case, the initial process of attraction or drawing forth occurs when one's will is aroused. So that's what we said. It comes from the crown, from the will is in the crown. The root of the word for will is to run. Ratzon is to run. A verse in the Song of Songs describes the attraction and will in the form of a plea. Mashcheni acharecha narutza. So draw me, we will run after you. So who's draw me? Draw me is the divine soul. Okay. And then we will run after you. The plural is that if the divine soul is drawn towards God, then the animal soul will run with it, will come with it also. In any case, it means to draw, to attract me, and then I'll run. It comes from my will. At first, Ratzon, will, is hidden in the unconscious, or even superconscious state beyond, I don't know why he says unconscious, even super, it's hidden in the superconscious, even beyond even the highest point of human consciousness. And this is called emunah. It's in the pure faith. At this level, one is not even aware of what potential lies within. That's the level at which it says that if we talk about the love between husband and wife, it says at that level that 40 days before the creation of the conception of the child, it's already declared and declared in heaven that this person will marry that person. But how can you say that when there's nobody there? So it's not referring, and people get hung up on this. It's like they think Basheret means there was a picture. And now, no. Really what it means is that you take from there the power to know that once you're married, this was, meaning it's retroactively, you can understand that this was declared in heaven. So every match is a match made in heaven. The fact that it falls apart is something else. But initially, the whole idea is that whomever you marry, it was declared a long, long time ago. How could it be declared a long, long time? Because we know about faith. That faith is something that always takes from the future. So it's like saying, in the future, these two people will want to be together. But it's a future. It's a future picture. It's not something that you can base yourself on. Once you get married, then that's what they meant. It's the same thing with Mashiach. From the beginning of creation, before the world was created, Hashem created the spirit of Mashiach. So why don't I know who this is? Why don't I know what it'll look like? Because you can only see it. Once you see it, then you can realize that this is what they meant the whole time. But unfortunately, it also depends on us. It's the same thing as marriage. It depends on what we do with it. Because the sages say that from the year 4000, now we're in 5778, from the year 4000, it was all Yemot HaMashiach. Last 2,000 years are all the days of the Mashiach. So why do they look the way they look? So they say, because of our sins, because of how we act, we got out of them whatever we got out of them. Wasn't so great till now. Maybe it was in some respects. In terms of the Torah, it's been pretty good. But in terms of other aspects, it wasn't so great. Okay. At this level, one is not even aware of what potential lies within. When this potential is aroused, then the will, which until this point was hidden, is activated and revealed. For example, okay, so let's see, maybe he says it. If two people are destined to marry each other, God has placed a point in each one's essence in the other. When they meet, if they sense this point of hidden essence that was until now dormant and unconscious within them, it will be love at first sight. Their meeting is the arousal that draws forth will, revealing their joint destiny. So it's almost like you feel Yes, this is what I was waiting for since before I was conceived, before I was created. Another example, a child who has shown no interest in music attends his or her first concert. The experience of being exposed to live music awakens a deep longing to learn to play music. Another child, also attending the concert for the first time, enjoys it, but is not drawn to the music in a way that arouses him to devote the time and effort to play himself. Each person has their own innate qualities and dispositions, and the experience of life awakens in each individual that which is hidden within at the right time. So this is what we've talked about in length, that in our crown we have this thing called talents, chushim, and they need to be awakened by something. And usually they're like this point that's waiting to become will. And why do we say that it's will? Because this is the mind, meaning the concealed wisdom within the will, the talents that a person has. We talked. I don't know if whoever heard the multiple intelligences course heard it there, but I think I've talked about it since here also. So first one needs to be drawn, as in this example, to music in general, and only afterwards to a particular instrument. So this stage is very quick. Right? It's love at first sight. It's something that hits you right away. Either it hits you, or it strikes you, or it doesn't. But then comes the main stage. And the main stage is the growth. And it takes years. Years upon years. How long? It could be your entire life. So the stage of Gdilah, growth, is a years-long stage of learning the instrument and practicing until becoming so unified with the instrument that one actually masters the art. So here he does it very quickly, and we spent a lot of time about it last week. That another way of corresponding these stages is to say the first one is crown, the second one is wisdom, and the third one is loving kindness. Okay? Keter, chokhmah, and chesed. So that love is chesed, that's easy. That this first attraction, this meshicha, moshcheni acharecha, comes from keter, that's also pretty easy. But the one that needs a lot more explanation is why does growth, meaning growing in love, not falling into it or being attracted into it, but rather growing in it, why that is related to wisdom. So we said last week that wisdom, its inner essence, is selflessness or self-nullification. So if you take the example of somebody learning to play music, you have to have a tremendous amount of selflessness, meaning there are many, many hours where you would rather be doing something else. And you have to be dedicated to it, devoted to it. And this is an amazing thing, that really in order to grow in some way, you have to have selflessness. That's why we always say that to children, you grow more at night than you do it during the day. Right? When you're sleeping, you grow more. Well, because you're selfless. You don't have the self. So it sounds like a joke, but it's not really a joke. It means that the more a person feels himself, the less they can dedicate themselves to whatever is at hand. Because if I'm looking for a gratification of self, so I can't get through any of the stages of learning how to do something. So with playing a musical instrument, that's the easy part. The harder part is with another person. So if there's that initial attraction, you have to get through years of selflessness, where you have to say, I'm not in it for myself. That's a very difficult thing to say. With children, we do it all the time. For some reason, with natural love, it's easier.
But you once said that children sense that we really do it for ourselves.
It's not that we do the whole thing for ourselves, rather that particularly at this moment I told you a story because I want you to be quiet, to give me a half an hour of peace and quiet afterwards. And when you don't, then I'm upset at you. Okay. But the whole endeavor of having children, this is one of the things that I think one of the only ways to understand how Elkanah could have told his wife Hannah what he said.
It's like what Yaakov said to Rachel,
No, so Yaakov said to Rachel, "Why are you coming to me with your complaints that you don't have children? Go to Hashem. I didn't create your womb. I didn't take away your children." Which is not a very nice thing to say in the end. So, however, the sages explain what he said and how he said. We have another example which is very different, which is Hannah and her husband Elkanah. Hannah also didn't have any children, and he said, "I'm better for you than 10 sons."
Aren't I? This wasn't even a question.
What?
Aren't I better than? Was it a question or a statement?
Tovanila, he says. It's not a question. It's a statement.
It's usually translated as a question.
Really?
Aren't I better for you than 10? Yeah.
No, Tovanila. It doesn't have Tovanila. I think so, anyway.
I guess it can go either way.
So,
Either way, she doesn't answer him. She doesn't. Say
she gets
maybe.
children.
But she doesn't say maybe yes, maybe no.
She accepts it. She accepts it. So why does she accept it? So it's interesting. Apparently, in terms of selflessness, it's true that you need a lot of selflessness to have children, but you need a lot more to be married. A lot more. So in that sense, it's like 10 children. It's like having 10 children. It's a lot harder.
Rabbi, with children, when you're children, there is that unconditional love.
Right.
But marriage is
There's
plain.
none, right? There's always,
Because that's what it is.
you always think that there's some kind of conditions. But that's what he's trying to say, that if you want to grow in marital love also, it can only grow if there's a feeling of selflessness, that I'm not here to satisfy my needs. It's very interesting that my wife said this a few days ago. She said, kids are getting older, so now I'm starting to get back from them. And when they get older, suddenly you begin to see the results of all your toil, of all your labor. Question is, does that happen with men? And if she's very selfless, over time, does she begin to see the same type of behavior towards herself from her husband? So I think in a woman, there's a natural willingness, in the same way that she wants children more. Then a man wants children more to keep his name, but not necessarily in order to give them an extension. And for a woman, I think that it's more a need to give. It's more a need to be selfless. So there's a more natural sense of being selfless in a woman, I guess. And then the question is, she keeps the marriage going for so many years, with the expectation that eventually the husband will grow up. And he'll start being selfless also. And then what happens when it doesn't happen? It's like she has she can hold her breath for a longer time, like waiting for it to happen. But if it doesn't happen, then it's very difficult. Where's the selflessness? So the truth is, there's a ton of selflessness which the woman doesn't see. Why? Because each one measures selflessness in a different way. So a woman measures the selflessness in terms of I made food, taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of, and thinking of herself last. Like to rest is like the last thing that I do. But for a husband, for the man, the selflessness is to give up on all the success that he thinks he could have had. It's different. It's not seen directly inside the house. It's more from the outside. In the sense,
Success if he hadn't gotten married?
yeah. If he wasn't dedicated so much to, because men, by definition, like we said, they want more of a name. But when I have a home, I'm constantly cutting my name in half because I can't stay late, right? Today it's like a real issue with like these big companies like Amazon or Google or whatever. People work like slave hours. Like it's unreal. They'll work 12, 14-hour days. So it's almost like they tell you can't be married and work here. It's one or the other. You won't be able to do both. But look at what they're doing. It's like also in terms of interest, not just a name for myself. It's almost just even in terms of who's doing the most interesting things in the world. There's so much to do. So this willingness to cut it short, to be at home, that's incredible selflessness. It's not measured the same way. It's a different measure altogether. So when you're doing couples therapy, you have to impress that on people. It's a different feeling of what selflessness means, because the self is defined differently. Yeah. So I can't measure them both the same way.
Can I just ask you something about the attraction? Sure. It seems like that's completely outside of us.
Right, that's what we say about the crown. It's above my head.
But we have to wait for something. We can't begin the process. It has to come from outside.
Right.
Everything else is a bit in our choice.
Right.
But that's completely dependent on us.
Right. Yeah, 100%. 100%. If there's no, that's what I said. If you have to have chefetz. Chefetz is another word for ratzon. It really means pleasure inside will, meaning something that you get pleasure from when you're doing. If you don't feel that in an attraction, the chances are, you can still build a relationship. It's not that you can't, but it'll be more technical. It'll be hard to come to the type of love that you want at the end. It'll be more settled. You're rectified people. You can live together. You can, in the same way that you could figure out how to live with somebody in a jail cell. People do it. Yeah, people do it all the time. They have to. What can they do? There's certain things that sometimes it feels like that, even though you had attraction in the beginning. It doesn't mean that during the process of growth, it could be that you'll feel that anyway.
So it sounds like you have to keep yourself in some kind of a joyful state, so that you are initiating your inner joy, and that you will be attracted to something. Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe. Sometimes people are just attracted because they're attracted. They come and unexpectedly, this is like, they feel, wow, this is something I'd like to do. This is something where I feel like I would find myself. And then they start having to actually go and study it and learn it and develop their abilities there. And wow, I didn't know it was so hard. But that's where the growth comes from. That's where the difficulty. So we'll have more to say about this as we go on. Ultimately, so now he says, the final development is dveikut, or clinging. Really the word is to cling, not unity. Dveikut really means to glue or to cling together. The unity of player and instrument, where the music of the heart and mind is transformed exactly in the actual sounds emanating from the instrument. But it's still an instrument in my hands. I'm not playing with my heart. It's not the same thing. Again, I'm playing the instrument. Ultimately, every flowering of love follows this three-stage progression. The goal of any experience of love is to reach that state of harmony, perfection, and oneness referred to as dveikut, clinging. If at any point interest or desire is lost, then in fact what's lost is the aspect of love fueling the relationship, resulting in a withering or severing of the connection. This applies to relationships, hobbies, professions, and beliefs as well. When love subsides, the will no longer runs towards completion. As long as the love grows, the will runs to unite with the object of love. So let's say it in a different way, that when it comes to connecting to Hashem, So there's initial attraction that every Jew feels. We call that faith. That every Jew has a point of faith in his heart, which really comes from the crown, but we describe it that it's in the heart. If you want to make your love for Hashem grow, this initial attraction, see, so we said growth is chokhmah, it's wisdom. You can't do it without learning Torah. It simply won't work. So in the case of Torah, it's very clear that the wisdom is mamish wisdom. That's exactly what it is. You have to learn the Torah's wisdom. And the more you learn the Torah's wisdom, why don't you become a professor of Torah? And instead you become a lover of Hashem. Hopefully that's supposed to be what happens. You're not supposed to become a professor of Torah knowledge. You're supposed to be to measure how much you know by how much your intensity of prayer grows. Because in prayer we express the heart. So if I'm learning and my prayer doesn't change, so that's a sign that I'm learning without selflessness. Meaning that I'm trying to learn for the sake of knowing more. It's called kardom lachforba. That it's ordered to be called a wise man. But I'm not learning in the sense of to increase my to negate myself, to negate my feeling of being separate from God. That's what it means to be selfless through Torah. That I learn the Torah in such a way that the Torah is constantly coming to negate my feelings of being separate from Hashem. Not to increase my knowledge. Doesn't mean that my knowledge won't increase, but that's not the goal. So one of the examples that Rav Ginzburg gave here in this respect was that, I probably mentioned it before because it's a good example, is that if you take a professor of mathematics and you tell him, so what can you tell me something new about 1 + 1 = 2? So he's like, no, it's pretty much the way you learned it in elementary school. But if you come to a person who's learning Torah all day and you ask him, can you tell me something new about Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz? If he can't tell you something new, so what's he doing all day? But that's exactly the difference. And even if he can't tell you something new in terms of knowledge, but he'll tell you something new in terms of emotion. So he'll read it in a different way. He'll sing it in a different, whatever it is. Well, 1 + 1 = 2, unless you're a very, very special type of professor, you probably can't sing. There are those, especially when you're dealing with music. With music, it's very hard to find people that are the other way around. I mean, it's very hard to find somebody who's into music and they're not emotional. And they don't get emotional about the music. Meaning,
the notes are the same, but they put...
They said that's the main thing that happens in music, that you learn how to flow. Meaning that at first you're playing separate notes until you come to the point where you're playing the music, not notes. Notes are or measures or all these things that cut it up. That's like when it's dead. When it's alive, it's one big thing. It's one live creation. So in music, there's something. That's why we put music up with Torah in the crown. And the same thing with other art forms, that they all become very emotional. A person can always add more to his feeling of doing there. And it's not like in mathematics, which is very intellectual, and in the end you're just adding knowledge. Okay. So, 2, right? Let's see. The 3-stage model of love described above is patterned after God's process of creation. We saw this already. Before the creation of any of the spiritual, physical worlds, and even before time itself, there arose in God's will, the desire to create a world outside of himself. So this arousal is the attraction. It's even a craving. It's an incredible, has no explanation. That's what we said. The love at first sight doesn't have an explanation. In this sense, this is what he really means to say, is that the world is a labor of love. But to say it another way is that Hashem fell in love with the world. It comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the intellect.
So Hashem fell in love with the concept of the world?
Of the world. There being somebody else that he could give to. Sort of like a woman who wants to have children. You fall in love with the concept, even though you've never seen it before.
It's hard to understand what it means that it arose in Hashem's will, like he was he was thinking about something else.
Yeah, suddenly you realize, I really think this is something I want to do. So it's not a joke. That's how it's described in Chassidus. It says that that's why he had to consult the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim souls were like the ones who said, yeah, this is what you want to do. Like sometimes when you go to, especially when people come to, just had somebody call yesterday, had a long conversation about a shidduch. She's in the middle of something and all these doubts and this and that. So they weren't really doubts. They were like, convince me that this is what I want. Like bring up all the different reasons why not, and I'll cut them down, and I'll feel much better that this is what I really want. So you have to, when you're talking to somebody about these things, you have to grope around to feel, what are they looking for? Are they looking for assurance? Or are they really in doubt and they're not sure whether this is something they want to do? So the tzaddikim felt that Hashem was in love already. He wanted this anyway. So they helped him, say it. It's him himself, but it's a part of him.
As opposed to the angels that he talked to.
The angels didn't exist yet, it says. That the souls of tzaddikim and the souls of angels are the same souls in general. Except that some of them become with free will and some of them become without it. Some of them are more complex, some of them are less complex. But in any case, it's like he's working it out with himself. It sounds strange, but there are people like that. I told you the story about Heshi Weinreb, Rabbi Weinreb from the OU, that called up the Rebbe to ask about whether he should to ask about whether he should go study medicine. And the Rebbe didn't hear his name and said he said in Yiddish, you should go ask. There's somebody in Baltimore. Yes. His name is Heshi Weinreb. You should go ask him. So he hung up. When he hung up, he said he thought about a little. What was this? And so the Rebbe was telling him some people have to figure it out by themselves. Like they have that capacity. Avram was like that. Avram Rishon was like that because he was able to. It's called self-reflection. They're able to reflect inside themselves to see what do they really want. There was a student of Rav Ginsburg's who was a Lubavitcher in the 60s, and he was in America at the time. And he wrote the letter. He wrote the Rebbe a few times asking him about different options of doing this, doing that. And he didn't get any answers. So finally he decided to call Rav Ginsburg up. Back then in the 60s it was a big deal to call Israel. So he called him up, and Rav Yitzchak said to him, I don't know what to tell you, but I'll tell you what the Rebbe told me. So he said to me, first of all, figure out what you want. After you figure out what you want, write to me about what you want, and I'll tell you if I think if it's a good idea or not. So he took the advice. He sat down to write the letter, and he says that just as he was finishing writing the letter, he's closing it up. He was in a yeshiva at the time. I guess he was in Morristown, wherever it was. So the guy with the mail comes in and says, "You have a letter from the Rebbe." So the Rebbe addressed exactly what he had written, that this is what he wanted, and he told him that he thought it was a good idea. So he says, there's this thing that you have to figure it out for yourself also. We learned this from Hashem. Because in certain things that are very essential to you, nobody else can help you figure it out. They can help you maybe, pose some of the questions, but in the end, you've got to make sure that you're whole with it. That this is what you want. That this is This is what you're attracted to in the end. This is where you want to go. After a few years, we learned that I don't think that the Rebbe ever told this to Rav Ginsburg. I think that he wrote this in a letter to Rav Ginsburg's father, where he told him that in Rav Ginsburg's case, if it's not something that he wants, nobody who will tell him from the outside will ever convince him. So he learned it in a roundabout way. It's the same idea. Okay. So Hashem fell in love with the world. He arose in God's will the desire to create a world outside of himself. This unfathomable arousal, because it's unfathomable because it's very hard to understand what does it mean that he wants something on the outside of him. This unfathomable arousal is God's meshicha, or attraction to create a world, at once united but seemingly separate from himself. This desire to be drawn down into the lower world is expressed in the Midrash. The Kadosh Baruch Hu desired for himself a dwelling place in the lower worlds, in lower reality. This idea is the secret of the tabernacle in the desert and later the temple in Jerusalem. When instructing Israel to build the tabernacle, God states, "Make for me a tabernacle, and I will dwell in their midst," meaning in the midst of the people. The ultimate purpose of God's initial Mashiach to create the world is that he perpetually unify himself with his creation. And this is what's called the Veikut. This is the final stage, the Veikut. The Veikut, clinging. So we also say that we cling to Hashem. So it means that Hashem clings to the world, and we cling to Hashem. And by the way, this means something very deep, if you think about it. Scientists especially, they're very happy to distance Hashem from us in any way that they can. So one of their again, they do it very, I think, bitmimut. Like they're very they're naive. I don't think they trust the mind too much. So in their mind's capacity, it seems that God could have created so many worlds. So since he could have created so many worlds, he probably did. And so what makes this world special? So in Torah there's an answer to this. He says, yes, he created many worlds, but he also destroyed them as he created them. Why? Because he didn't like them. He couldn't connect to them. This wasn't what he was looking for. So I think we may have talked about this here, but people got a feeling that how could you say that about Hashem, that he created things and he destroyed them, like as if they have no purpose? And more importantly, how can you say that he didn't know beforehand what he wanted, that he needed to try it? So, did we talk about this here? I think we talked about this here. So the way to understand this medrash is to understand that we're not trying to describe Hashem's inability to know what he wants. Rather, we're trying to give human beings, especially the ones who, like scientists, are asking, but maybe, he has a million other worlds. What makes this one special? We're trying to answer for us, for our sake, what makes us different than every other possibility. That all the other possibilities he tried and he discarded. He said, this is not for me. Like, understand that Hashem is attached to the world in a special way, even though, you're right, he's infinite. He could have made any number of worlds, and they could have been different, and they could have been minorly different, with small deviation. I would be me with just a little bit more hair on my head. So, but he didn't like that world. Somehow he needs me to be this way. He needs each one of us to be this is the world that he loves. So this medrash is trying to say things for my benefit. It's in my benefit to understand that Hashem wrote the Torah. So he's saying in that medrash, he's telling me, he inspired the sage who wrote that, to say, look, know that I could have had any other number of worlds, but this is the one that I choose. So understand that I'm clinging to the world, because we understand what it means that we cling to him. So I have no agenda but Hashem's agenda. But that Hashem doesn't have any other agenda but this world. He could have any number of worlds. So he says, no, I tried them all. You're right. In the potential and in actuality, I could make any number of worlds. But this is the one that I care for. This is the one that I'm attached to. This is the only world in my agenda. I don't go somewhere else at night to take after, to look after something else. Know that this is the only world, period. Because I'm attracted to it. To this I'm attracted.
But why? In his crown.
We said there's no reason for it. In the crown, there's no reason for why things. It's above the rational mind. It's above the intellect.
You can't say because of the Torah and because of us.
No, you could have had Torah in other places also, but it's just not it.
There's no kashas on a taiva.
Right, it's a taiva.
What?
There's no kasha and kushiyot and taiva.
What? Say it in English.
There's no. You can't ask questions about something that's a craving.
But why do you like strawberry ice cream and not pistachio ice cream? You can't.
Oh,
really...
just don't say that word.
Which one?
Well, the first one's fine. And in the par of ice cream in Israel, they almost always only have that green thing.
Stay out of that bowl.
No, pistachios by themselves is fine. But why would you make it into... Can't put those two words together even. It's like... Say them. Okay.
Well, I don't understand why there had to be others that needed to be destroyed.
Because not destroyed in the sense that he made them and destroyed them, but in order to show that this one is unique.
But if you only created this one, it would have also been unique.
No, because then he wouldn't... It's like the difference between... I mean, there is such a thing, but like... What makes you feel more special? If you went out with a lot of men, or if a man went out with a lot of women, then he chose you, or that you're the first person that he met.
Right.
So the fact that it's the first person, it's special in a certain way, that it's like preordained. But you're missing the choice, right? That. So here he says, I tried them. They're not for me. We went out on dates, me and these worlds, but it didn't work out.
Something about Malchus, for Malchus to be expressed, there needs to be something feels itself outside of Hashem. There's no Malchus without.
En melech belo am.
So,
I imagine that in all the worlds he had something outside of him, but it wasn't this thing. It's this thing that attracts him.
The other ones must be awful.
Maybe it was nice, but it was not it.
Okay.
I wonder if they had free will in the other worlds.
I wonder if we have free will in this
That's
one.
another question. Don't know.
Okay. So, this is called Vikut. So first of all, it's Vikut between him and his creation. All that lies between these 2 points of beginning and end, including the actual creation of the universe and all of human history, is termed Dila. It's all the growth of God's love for his creation.
So he loves us more now than he did.
Then he did. "Ken avti etchem amar Hashem." And then we say, "B'ma avtanu, harei ach Esav leYaakov." How do we know that we love you, that you love us? You also love. We have a brother. His name is Esav. So why do you love us and not him?
Is this from the Navi? Where is
Yeah,
this?
we just read this. Veishlach. It's the Haftarah of Veishlach. Of Vayetze. 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Then we're handicapped.
What you are. So what's the answer?
So it means that the story of human history is the story of realizing what Hashem loves. It's a very different way of looking at history. Usually you look at history as just events. But it's like Hashem revealing slowly and slowly the love grows, in the sense that He can reveal what He loves. So we have this whole contest going on with Esav, with the Christianity. There's no contest with the Muslim world, because he doesn't love them. No, she doesn't. It's clear. There's nothing appealing about them. There's nothing that a normal human being would connect to. They only have this, call it, strong family tradition that this is how they do things, and they force it. Every generation forces it on the next. But so normal.
Many converts, no?
Because they're slowly becoming Christianized. They're becoming when they came to the West, they realized that, wait a minute, maybe you can be a human being also. You don't have to act like a mamash.
Well, Islam converts to Christianity?
So they have theoretically conversion. Their real conversion is by the sword. That's the one they prefer. They prefer that much more to somebody, because they say that because it's all yirah. They want it all to be fear. That's also how they conceive of Hashem. So it's very deep inside them. So they'd rather that you come to Islam from fear, not from love. But Christianity is not like that. They're not so crazy. They tried it for a while, and they saw that they themselves weren't very happy with it. So they prefer saying we're the religion of love. That's how they describe themselves, right?
What about the pogroms and the Inquisition?
They have to blame somebody for all the bad things that happened.
2,000 years they've been
Kim, but they
trying.
didn't try. It was more like blame. Like I've tried to bring you nicely into the fold, and you're not willing to. So you're guilty for every terrible thing that happens here. So because it's not real love. It's not. It doesn't really. But if they don't do that, if they don't get to that stage, so there's something unsettled. There's some higayon to what they do. There's some still connection to Torah. There's some connection to Yiddishkeit. So the Zohar always describes our contention with Rome, with Esav. It doesn't so much talk about us being in some kind of contest with Yishmael. Yishmael is like, he's more like mafriya. He's a bothersome thing, but he's not. There's nothing essential there. But with Esav, they have, like, the Chachamim constantly have real discussions with them, and they have a way. He has a way of looking at things, and we know that Yitzchak loved him. It's not so simple. He gave him a lot of strength that what he's doing is right. And what's he doing? He's like, we talked about this a lot, but we'll see this later, that Yitzchak with the love that was left over, we'll get to it at some point, but love travels in Tanakh. So Yitzchak loved Rivka, and then Rivka loved Yaakov, but still Yitzchak had a little bit of love left over, and the little bit that he didn't give Rivka, he gave to Esav. So they have something there. What did he love about him? He loved that he was a very practical person, that he wanted to rectify reality itself. He believed in the physical nature of the world. He didn't think that you had to be spiritual in any way. You could just, the matter of the world itself is holy. You don't need anything special. You don't need mitzvot. You don't. Just the world itself is by as it is. It's fine. And that's at least what Yitzchak saw in him. And in Yaakov, you saw this guy who's got all these long, winded plans. It's going to take 1,000 years until this guy even gets his act together, and then he's going to do this, and he's going to do that, and who knows if he'll succeed. It just seemed like for Yitzchak, this wasn't for Yitzchak. Yitzchak wants now, like Mashiach now. He's a Mashiachist type of guy.
The Rebbe said that Yitzchak saw the Gerim that were going to come out of Esav.
Rabbi Meir.
Rabbi Meir, especially. Rabbi Akiva also.
Grandson of Nehor.
Yeah. We see in the end, most of the Torah Shabbat Peh came from them. That we didn't have the guts to do what they did. Apparently, these Gerim. these Gerim had this incredible ability to come parshan the Torah the way that the Jews were like, we don't do that. But they were right. That's how you're supposed to do it. So in any case, the story is that in the Zohar they have a debate with Esav, with Esav's I guess it's a ministering angel, and he says to them, "You had your heyday." He says to the Jews, "You had your heyday." When was your heyday? When during the time of David and Shlomo, and then the first 8 kings of Beis David. The first 8 kings, during their time, there was no kingdom of Edom. Edom was destroyed, annihilated completely. Historically, it didn't exist. And even if it existed, it was entirely under the sovereignty of David and Shlomo. They completely conquered it. There was nothing left. We even read these chapters in Tehillim when Yoav goes and he kills them all, and then he makes them into servants, and it's a big deal. He says that was your heyday, and that's what you got. And from now on, it's only us. And what's our proof? That we count the calendar based on the sun, and the sun never goes away. And you count according to the moon, and the moon has now disappeared, and you have nothing. So the answer was, it's not so difficult to understand what they answered, but you have to think about it more deeply. So they say, in the same way that the moon disappeared, it's going to be reborn. Whereas yours, however it is, that's how it is. And that's it. So this whole interaction in the Zohar is very like, what are you guys talking about? We had our heyday, and now we're going to be reborn. What? No, it's not. It's not in the Talmud. It's not with the Chachmei Atuna. It's like something. Only Zohar writes like these strange things. So it's accepted among the commentaries on the Zohar that it's talking about history. That you hear these words like who is Esav today? Well, it used to be. Like today, maybe they're not so much, but they're still pretty much. It's just that they have a surrogate son that's been doing his own thing. But the sun never sets on who?
The British Empire.
The British Empire. It's not a joke. The Britons, for a long time, first of all, they were the most religious out of everybody. You know, what they had in Rome, that was like nothing compared to what they had in England. They mamish believed in what they were doing. And maybe more importantly than that they just believed, first of all, they were the first ones to reform, to say Rome is not the thing, it's our connection with God, we decide what's going on. But I think that even more importantly than that is that they, if you go look at a map of England, you'll see all these biblical names. So people say it's the same thing in America. You have to remember that America took it from England. It's not the other way around. That the English, they had a long period in their history where they identified themselves as the 10 lost tribes. That's how they conceived of themselves. They didn't just come and say, we're Israel. They said, it's not just that we have spiritually taken over the way the church said that we've taken. They said, mamish, we are Israel, period. We are the 10 lost tribes. And they had the English.
And the Scottish
But it's everywhere. They used to have a map of how England was divided into each of the 10 tribes. It's an unbelievable thing. In the 1700s. So they're like, they have this whole concept. And for them, it's like the sun never sets in the British Empire. It's not a joke. For them, it was very serious in the sense of that we are chosen. If you know something about the English, they feel entitled regardless of what they do or don't do. It's an amazing thing. It's much more than in America. America feels that it has an incredible power because of its wealth and its resources. And the English, they don't have that many resources, but whatever they have this incredible expectation that everybody has to give us everything for free. For free. That's their conception of themselves. I didn't know about this until about
Why did they side with
4
the
months
Arabs
ago.
here?
What?
Then why did they side with the Arabs?
They don't side with anybody, they side with themselves. But it's a question of who's going to give us more. So for instance, the Americans, if they have any oil interests somewhere, they'll pay for it. The English just take it. They have they won't pay a cent for it. It's like, say thank you that we're taking it. That's their whole conception. It's weird. I didn't think this could exist until somebody showed me. Here, take a look. They get gas from natural gas from the Russians, from North Sea, Russians. How much does the natural gas cost in Russia? How much does it cost in England? It's not theirs, but they get it. So it's less than a third of the price. How? Because this is England. It's something else. You want to sell to us, you give it to us for free. We'll sell it whatever price we think we need to sell it. It's like this whole, it sounds strange until you actually dig a little bit into their history and how they conceive of themselves. But that's how they see themselves. So they have this whole, so really that, if you want to really identify where Esav is today, so he's also in America, but really there he's not, he's the good part, he's the surrogate son, or just the son, the wayward son who broke off from the, but this is really where it came from. It came from the United Kingdom. So they're the ones who are the son. They're the ones who feel that they're really the son. With a U.
Well, didn't the Japanese also have
They also have the same thing. Something once wrote, there's an interesting book that was written about the two things that are, the two island nations off of a great continent that developed more than the continent. It's an amazing thing when you think about it. England is not in Europe, and Japan isn't in Asia. And each of them, they're about the same size. It's very interesting. They're about the same size. They're on the same scale of number of people. England has, I think, 60 million. And Japan's like 120 million. It used to be closer. But they're both island nations. They're very limited for area, and they're very densely populated. And both of them did more than the continents that they're related to, by leaps and bounds, much more. Like England took over the world, and the Spanish, they did something, but it wasn't. Okay. Anyway, so the whole story of the world is figuring out what is Hashem love. It's like the story of His love showing through. So in the end, it's what is my object of love? So there are those who are they're certain 100% that He loves us. How do I know? From history. That look, that history has always been on our side. So when the English say this, they're really talking about maybe 1,600 years of history since the fall of the Roman Empire. When we talk about us, so there's been a lot of ups and downs. But certainly you have to say, it's like these convoluted love stories, where in the end you know that this is the woman he needs to get married with. As strange as the whole thing has been, but there's never been anything like this. There's never been anything similar to this story in the world of Hashem dealing with one nation for so long, and sending prophets and doing this and doing that, and driving them crazy and them driving him crazy. It's a very complex story. But in the end, it's a love story. It's not a marriage yet, but they're getting there. It's a long, it's a very long courtship. That's what it is. And once they almost got married, and then they decided maybe not. It's all these. Okay. So though history has a rhythm of ebb and flow, exile and redemption, advances and distractions, in truth, all of human history is progressing towards a predetermined goal or destiny. The Messianic age, or end of days, is a time when God will openly reveal Himself. What does that mean? He will openly reveal His love. So that spiritual and physical reality, Creator and creation, will cling to one another in a mystically passionate loving embrace. And that day, God will be one and His name one. The unity of history spanning all
Let's
time.
just go back to his name. I never got, what is it that his name is one? Why is
The
that
name
not
is a
such big
revelation. It's
deal?
how I reveal myself. Like my name is how you call me. So it's not me, but it's how I'm referenced. Kind of how you hold on to me. It's like a handle, and they use it. So it's what I reveal from myself. So right now, what Hashem reveals and who He is are two different things. They're not one. They don't cling. They don't become one entirely. In the future, they'll become one again, meaning that how He reveals Himself and who He is will be transparent. There'll be one thing only.
So his name is how he reveals himself.
So one way of saying it is that when we see Yud Kei Vav Kei, right, the four-letter name, we don't say Yud Kei Vav Kei, we say Adni. Meaning that we don't reveal it the way that it's written. We don't reveal it the way that its essence is. Okay. So a little bit more. The unity of history spanning all time and space is further explained in the verse, I am first and even I am last. Ani Rishon v'ani Acharon. I am first even before creation. I am last even when the purpose of creation is fulfilled. So what does that mean? That if at the end of, let's say, a marriage, the two people can tell themselves apart, so the complete love hasn't been achieved. The complete love is in such a way that in the end it seems like there's only one here.
Don't we say it's one soul, it's two halves?
Okay. And so they become one entirely. With Hashem in creation, it's to the point, remember we talked about this one, that the bittul, the nullification that you do after the mitzvah, is greater than the nullification during the mitzvah. During the mitzvah, it's just Hashem is in my hand. When Hanukkah is coming up, so it's with Hanukkah candles, it's very clear that when I light the candle, it should be that the flame goes up by itself. So what do you mean by itself? So I didn't raise the flame. I didn't light it. So who lit it? Hashem did. That's the feeling that I have. It's not me lighting the candle. It's Hashem lighting the candle. I'm just the hand for Him. I'm the handle that He's using. But after I finish the mitzvah, what should be my feeling? So it says it's a greater nullification than even when you're doing the mitzvah. What's nullification then? It's as if there was never a world, there was never a Chanukah, there was never a mitzvah, there was never anything. It was only Hashem, period. And that whole thing that I just did is just swallowed back up into the oneness of Hashem. So in Hashem there's no mitzvah? Of course there is. But it's not separate. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell it as a separate instance that's happening. In the same way that if a person is very whole with themselves, so they won't say, it wasn't me who ran that red light, it was somebody else. You can't say that. Meaning, in the end, it wasn't, even if I can't remember it, even if I can't, exactly put my finger on when it happened or how it happened. But when I have a sense of wholeness, it's that I take responsibility. I am everything that I did. I can't divorce it from myself. I would like to maybe, but I can't. That's the feeling of wholeness that Hashem will reveal at the end of history. That He did everything. That there wasn't anything here that actually happened separately. I don't think that there was actually Moshe and he gave a shir. Well, Hashem gave a shir, and he had to put somebody there so it would look like somebody's lips were moving because